Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories as per usual. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's go for 1,200 likes on this one. I think if everybody took just a quick second, we could get there. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated. I post content just like this as often as I can. I try to aim for roughly every 5 days. Sometimes it can be really difficult to get 2 hours of horror stories within that time period. I want to make sure that the stories are good, and also 2 hours is a pretty long time. But I do my very best, and I post as often as I can, so if you are interested in that, be sure to subscribe. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, enjoy the 2 hours of horror stories with no mid-roll ads. Except for the ad break after this intro, there will not be any more after that one. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. Good night, everyone. My name is Frank, and I quit. Effective immediately. I am no longer willing to pretend that what happens in this place is normal, because it is not. This place is sick. If there is a God, then he turns a blind eye to what happens here. Instead of writing a typical resignation letter, I am simply going to document what happened yesterday. I am certain that anyone who reads this will either understand why I am leaving, or think I am insane. I will sign this statement. I will swear to it under oath if anyone asks. What follows is true, recalled to the best of my ability. For those who do not know me, I am a search and rescue officer with the National Park Service. Up until about a week ago, I loved my job. The wilderness brings with it a lot of strange happenings, and I have heard more than my fair share of strange stories. The people of Glen Haven are deeply superstitious. They always have been, but even with the rumors and campfire legends, I always found the job extremely rewarding. Out here, you learn to ground yourself in reality. People get lost and they panic. The woods are bigger than most people realize, and fear can make the imagination run wild. Sometimes you have to remind yourself that the boogeyman is not real. There are no werewolves roaming the forests. There is no witch trapped in some forgotten well making clothing out of skin. And a random staircase in the woods is just that. A staircase. That's what I used to believe. A few weeks ago, my colleague and friend, Josh, disappeared from the job. Just stopped showing up. Josh had been my partner for years. We worked every kind of call together. Lost hikers, injured climbers, the occasional recovery that none of us like to talk about afterward. He was good at the job, calm under pressure, sharp instincts, the kind of guy who could pick up on small details that others might miss. I knew he had been thinking about leaving. We had sat down together a few times and worked on his resume. He talked about moving somewhere quieter, somewhere without the constant search calls and the long nights. I figured eventually he would put in his notice like anyone else. But that is not what happened. Josh did not resign. He did not transfer. He did not say goodbye. One day he was here, and the next day he was simply gone. The last time I saw him was the morning of his final shift. He looked tired, the kind of tired that sleep does not fix. When I asked him what was wrong, he just said he had not been sleeping well. I left early that day. Now I wish I hadn't. Something about the woods had been bothering him for a while. I assumed he meant the stories the locals like to tell, the usual nonsense. I tried calling him that evening after he failed to show up for a shift. It went straight to voicemail. I sent a message asking if everything was all right. No response. A day passed, then another. Eventually, I stopped calling. Maybe I reminded him too much of the job. Maybe he just wanted to leave this place behind completely. I guess it does not really matter now. Since Josh left, no one has replaced him. It has just been me working the long shifts. Me and Gus. Gus has been here longer than I have. He was already part of the team when I started years ago. He is old now. His muzzle has gone gray and he moves a little slower when he first gets up. But when it comes to finding a scent, there is nothing slow about him. Gus is the best tracker I have ever seen. We have had kids go missing out here before. Sometimes the only thing left behind is a backpack or a jacket. You let Gus smell it, and he will put his nose to the ground like someone flipped a switch. Then he just goes. Straight through brush, across streams, up hills, like he has a map running in his head. More than once it has felt like watching a GPS find its route. Sometimes I know someone's gonna be fine by how quick he moves. Gus has saved a lot of people. More than me. Yesterday evening started like any other. I was sitting in the ranger station going through paperwork when there was a knock at the door. I got up and opened it. A woman came stumbling inside. It was around 6 in the evening. She looked like she had run the whole way there. Her breath came in sharp, uneven bursts, and tears were streaming down her face. She told me her son was missing. They had been out walking one of the upper trails together. 1 minute he had been right beside her. The next minute he was gone. Just like that. Poof. I did my best to try to calm her down. Panic spreads fast in situations like that, and if you let it take over you lose precious time. I sat her down at the small desk near the front window and told her we would do everything we could to find him. Then I reached for the radio and tried to contact command. All I got back was static. That part was not unusual. The equipment here is older than it should be, definitely breaking multiple codes. Please, somebody make note of that for whatever poor fool takes my job. I have been complaining about it for years. The radios crackle, the batteries die quick, and half the time you are lucky if anyone hears you at all. I tried again. More static. No phone signal either. When I spoke with the mother, Gus stood quietly near a front window. His eyes were pointed toward the tree line, staring out into the woods as the sun slipped lower behind the hills. The light was fading fast, and the forest was already starting to sink into shadow. I asked her the usual questions, while she tried to steady herself enough to answer. She didn't talk much. Her son was 6 years old. She had last seen him about 2 hours earlier. That might sound like a long time, but the place she described was near the highest point of our trail systems. We have 6 trail runs, and the topography changes greatly. The hike down from there takes a while even for us. I figured she must have searched as much as she could on her own before panic finally pushed her to run for help. Gus did not react to her the way he usually does. Normally he walks right up to people, gives them a gentle nudge, or sits beside them, like he understands they are scared. Even a simple wagging tail can calm someone down when they are in a situation like that. But tonight, for whatever reason, he was not in the mood. He kept staring into the woods. The mother reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a glove, blue and knitted. I felt like I recognized it. Maybe they sold it at the local Walmart or something. She told me it belonged to her son. I took the glove and knelt down beside Gus, holding it out for him to smell. His nose twitched as he caught the scent. He began to move towards the woods, so I knew we had a shot at getting the kid. I told the mother she should stay at the station, while I went to search. That is the normal procedure. Missing person cases can get chaotic, and having family members wandering the trails usually makes things worse. But she begged me to let her come. She said she could not just sit there and wait. And looking at her, hearing the desperation in her voice, I realized I did not have it in me to tell her no. So I grabbed my flashlight, clipped the radio to my belt, and stepped out into the darkening woods with Gus leading the way. The mother calmed down a little once we started walking. That happens sometimes. Movement gives people something to focus on. I kept the conversation to a minimum. I have never been good at small talk anyway, and in situations like that, It usually does more harm than good. People either want silence or answers. The trail was already getting dark beneath the trees. The sun had dipped low enough that the forest swallowed most of the remaining light. My flashlight cut a narrow tunnel through the brush ahead of us, while Gus trotted a few yards in front, nose low to the ground. We had been walking for maybe 15 minutes when I noticed a beam of light flickering through the trees ahead of us. Another flashlight. At first it was just a faint glow between the trunks, moving slowly along the trail toward us. I stopped. The mother stayed close to me. I turned toward her. "Does your son have a flashlight with him?" She shook her head immediately. "No." We kept walking toward the light. A minute later, the beam rounded the bend in the trail, and its owner came into view. It was one of the regular hikers. I had seen her on the trails dozens of times over the years. Her name was Amanda, I think. The type you see out here all the time. Expensive Patagonia jacket, fresh pair of Hoka trail runners, one of those slim hiking backpacks that probably cost more than the radio sitting on my belt. Before I could even say hello, Gus bolted ahead of us. For a moment he looked 10 years younger. His tail wagged wildly as he bounded up to her, jumping and circling like an overexcited puppy. Amanda laughed and crouched down to greet him. "Well, hey there, Gus," she said, scratching behind his ears. I stepped closer and lifted my flashlight slightly so she could see my face. "Evening, Amanda." She looked up at me, still smiling. "Evening, Frank." I asked her if she had seen anyone else out on the trails that evening. Anyone at all. She shook her head. "No, just you now. Is everything all right?" I explained that a young boy had wandered off the trail and we were trying to track him down before it got any darker. As I spoke, I glanced back toward the mother, half expecting her to add something, maybe describe her son, maybe call his name. But she said nothing. She stood a few steps behind me with her head lowered, staring at the ground. Grief can hit people in strange ways. Some cry, some panic, some shut down completely. She was shutting down. Amanda and I spoke for another moment or two. She asked if there was anything she could do to help. Normally I would have told her to head back to the trailhead and stay clear of the search area, but with the radio acting up and no service out here, I needed someone who could reach the outside world. I told her that once she drove far enough from the park she should call 911, explained that we had a missing child, and tell them which trail we are on. She nodded immediately. I thanked her and wished her a safe walk back. She started down the trail toward the valley. Gus watched her go for a moment, tail still wagging. Then he slowly walked back to my side. For some reason I could not quite explain, I found myself watching Amanda's flashlight a little longer than I needed to, as it disappeared between the trees. Something about the encounter didn't feel right. At the time, I told myself it was just the situation. Missing kids have a way of putting everyone on edge. We continued upward along the trail. As we climbed, the temperature dropped quickly and the air began to feel thinner. The forest grew quieter the higher we went. Even the wind seemed to disappear up there. The mother had not spoken in a long time. After a while, I turned and asked if she needed water or wanted to stop and rest for a moment. She stood with her arms pulled tightly against her chest, as if trying to keep warm. Her long blonde hair hung forward and covered most of her face. When I asked the question, she simply shook her head. She never looked up. Ahead of us, Gus barked once, sharp and alert. He had wandered farther up the trail than usual. That normally meant the scent was strong, and he was confident about where he was going. We kept moving. Near the top of the trail, we reached a sharp bend and turned left. The trail narrowed there before fading out completely. Beyond that point, there was no official path. Just rough ground, loose rock, and low brush. Gus did not hesitate. He pushed straight into the trees. I turned back toward the mother and told her she should wait on the trail. It was safer there and easier for the search teams to find her later. She did not answer. She did not refuse either. She simply followed. Up close, I could see how pale she looked in the beam of my flashlight. Her skin almost seemed gray in the cold light. She looked freezing, but she never complained. After a few minutes of walking, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the glove the woman had given me. Gus had already taken the scent and moved ahead, but I found myself turning the glove over in my hand as we walked. I could tell something wasn't right. It felt strange. I rubbed the fabric between my fingers as I walked, trying to place the feeling. It felt bigger than I expected. I told myself it was nothing at the time, but it's clear now that the glove was adult size. It would have fit me, so it certainly wouldn't work for a 6-year-old. Gus barked from somewhere ahead on the trail, sharp and excited. I picked up the pace to follow him, letting the thought slip from my mind, and we pushed deeper into the woods until the darkness around us became nearly total. My flashlight was the only thing cutting through it. Then I heard it. At first it was faint, just a soft trickling sound somewhere ahead of us. Maybe water. A small stream running down the mountain. But as I followed Gus, the sound grew louder. Soon it was unmistakable. Running water. A moment later the trees opened up and the source revealed itself in the beam of my light. I stopped dead in my tracks. Because sitting at the top of that mountain was a slip and slide. Yes, a slip and slide. Not some cheap plastic sheet either. This thing was huge. It had a large inflatable entrance at the top, a bright archway in yellow and red like something from a carnival. You'd half expect to see clowns or a Ferris wheel to be nearby. Water ran steadily down the plastic surface, glistening under the flashlight beam as it flowed downhill. It looked incredibly out of place. The water kept running as if it was hooked up to some secret utility line. I felt sick the moment I saw it. If a 6-year-old boy had wandered up here and found that thing, there was no chance in hell he had ignored it. I turned to say something to the mother. She was gone. 1 second she had been behind me, like right behind me. On a few occasions she was so close I could feel her breath. The next, there was nothing but darkness between the trees. I spun around and called out for her. No answer. I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. The forest swallowed my voice. Gus stood a few feet away, staring toward the slide. Slowly I walked toward the inflatable archway. The closer I got, the stranger I felt. The ground beneath my feet sloped sharply downward, and I realized just how steep the hillside really was. The slide began flat enough near the entrance, but within a few feet it dropped away into a steep slope. At least 45 degrees. Gus suddenly stopped behind me. Completely stopped. I turned and called for him to come along, but he would not move. He planted his feet in the dirt and refused to step any closer. It reminded me of a video game character hitting the invisible boundary of the map. Come on, Gus. He did not budge. That alone was enough to make me uneasy. Gus had followed me into every kind of terrain imaginable over the years. He was not the type to hesitate. But something about that slide made him refuse, and as it turns out, his instincts were on point. As I stepped closer to the archway, I began to feel strange, lightheaded, almost like I had been drinking. My thoughts felt slow and distant, like they were drifting away from me. And then a thought appeared in my mind. I should try the slide. It felt completely reasonable. You know, like when you try to explain a dream and it sounds insane, but it felt normal at the time? I took off my coat and dropped it on the ground. Then I stepped out of my boots. I even caught myself wondering what the best way to go down would be. Head first, on my stomach, or sliding down on my back. The idea seemed fun. Exciting. Gus began barking wildly behind me. His bark was sharp and frantic now, nothing like the friendly noise he made earlier with Amanda. I stepped forward toward the plastic surface, ready to launch myself down. Then something slammed into my leg. A burst of sharp pain shot through my ankle, and I looked down to see Gus clamped onto it with his teeth. His jaws were locked tight around my leg. I panicked. Without thinking, I swung my arm and hit him across the head. He let go. The force of the movement threw me off balance, and I stumbled sideways. My foot slipped in the wet grass beside the slide. Then suddenly I was falling. I rolled down the hillside beside the plastic surface, picking up speed immediately. The slope was even steeper than it looked from the top. Dirt and rocks tore at my clothes as gravity dragged me downward. In seconds I realized just how much danger I was in. Luckily, and also unluckily, I slammed into a tree at what felt like 60 miles an hour. The impact knocked the air out of my lungs, and I felt something break in my ribs or maybe my arm. Pain exploded through my body and I collapsed at the base of the trunk. When I finally managed to lift my head and look forward, my stomach dropped. About 3 feet past that tree, the ground simply ended. A sheer cliff, at least 100 feet straight down to boulders and rocks. If that tree had not been there, I would not be writing this. I looked down into the darkness below the cliff and saw something among the rocks. At first it was just a shape, something hunched over and curled on itself, between a cluster of boulders. My heart jumped. Hey kid, are you alright? The words felt stupid the moment they left my mouth. A fall like that would have killed almost anyone, let alone a 6-year-old. Still, you say things like that automatically in this job. You say them because sometimes you get lucky, but not this time. No one answered. I forced myself to my feet and looked for a way down. The cliff was steep, but not completely vertical. There was a narrow path of broken stone and dirt that curved along the face of the drop. If I was careful, I might be able to reach the rocks below. Maybe the kid had survived. Maybe he was unconscious. Maybe there was still something I could do. I had to try. So I started down. Every step hurt. My ribs screamed every time I tried to breathe too deeply. I could feel blood running down my side and soaking into my shirt. More than once my vision blurred, and I had to stop and steady myself against the rock. But I kept moving. It took a long time to reach the bottom. By the time I finally stepped onto the loose stones surrounding the cluster of boulders, my legs were shaking and my lungs felt like they were filled with fire. Only then did I realize Gus was gone. I had not seen him since I fell. I told myself he must have stayed at the top of the slope. Dogs are smart about cliffs. Smarter than people sometimes. I hoped he was all right. I hoped he forgave me for striking him. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness as I slowly approached the body. Over the years I have seen things that would turn most people's stomachs. Recoveries that lasted days in the heat. Bodies that had been in the wilderness long enough for the forest to start reclaiming them. But nothing prepared me for what I saw lying between those rocks. It wasn't a child. It was Josh. For a moment, my brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. The image in front of me just did not make sense. Josh lay twisted against the stones, his body broken and half collapsed in on itself. He looked impossibly thin, gaunt, like the flesh had shrunk tight against his bones. His skin was gray beneath the dried blood. His jaw hung wide open at an unnatural angle, clearly shattered in the fall. The smell hit me a second later. Rot and old blood and the sour stink of something that had been lying out in the wild for too long. It was clear that animals had been feeding on him. One of his legs was gone entirely, torn and taken. His arms were stretched out in front of him, rigid and twisted as if he had hit the rocks head first with his hands reaching out to catch himself. Weeks. That was my first thought. He had been here for weeks. The forest had been slowly taking him apart piece by piece while the rest of us wondered why he stopped showing up for work. I sank to my knees beside him, and that was when I saw it. One glove, still clinging to his hand. One. My stomach turned cold. Slowly I reached into my pocket and pulled out the glove the woman had given me earlier. For a moment I just stared at the two of them. Then I held mine beside the one on Josh's hand. They matched perfectly. Same color, same stitching, same worn thread at the wrist. My hands began to shake. I looked back up toward the cliff above me, toward the slide, and for just a second, in the faint glow of my flashlight reflecting off the wet plastic above, I saw a figure standing there, tall, pale, a woman. She was looking down at me. Her face was hidden in the darkness. The mother. The moment my light shifted toward her, she stepped backward and disappeared into the night. I shouted after her. Words I won't write down. The forest swallowed my voice, then I looked back down at Josh, and the reality of what had happened finally hit me. Josh had not quit. He had been taken out here, tricked the same way I had been, led to the slide. I had never been more grateful for Gus. I sat there beside what was left of my friend and started to cry. Josh did not deserve to die like that. Over the next few agonizing hours, I managed to drag myself back down the mountain and make it to the ranger station. Every step felt like I was being stabbed in the ribs. By the time I reached the door, I was barely conscious. There were police waiting for me. Amanda had done exactly what I asked. She must have found a signal and called it in, because the lot was full of patrol cars when I stumbled out of the woods. They sat me down and started first aid right here on the floor of the station. Someone wrapped my side. Someone else shined a light in my eyes. All the while they kept asking questions. What happened? Where the body was? What I had seen? I told them everything. I told them about the boy. I told them about the trail. I told them about the slip and slide sitting at the top of the mountain like some kind of BS from a cartoon. Some of them glanced at each other. I know they think I'm mad, but they won't when they go out there. I told them about the woman who led me out there, the one who gave me the glove, the one who stood at the top of that slide and watched me fall. They had me repeat the story again and again that night. Every detail, every step. Some of the officers knew Josh personally, so when I told them what I had found at the bottom of the cliff, the room went quiet. While relaying the story, a thought came to my mind. We have cameras. The ranger station has security cameras covering every entrance and the parking lot. We could review them to get an image of the woman. I remember feeling angry while we waited for the footage to load. Angry and hopeful at the same time. I wanted to see her face. I wanted her punished. The officer running the computer rewound the footage to earlier that evening. Then we watched. I walked up to the front door and opened it. I held my hand out to beckon someone inside, but no one came inside. My neck rotated like I was watching someone walk through the door, but no one did. I was alone. I stopped in the middle of the room and began speaking. The camera showed me holding the door open for empty air, gesturing toward the chair for someone to sit down, nodding as if someone was answering my questions. At one point I even reached out my hand for a handshake, waiting for someone who was never there to take it. The officers in the room didn't say anything for a long time. They just kept watching the footage as I spoke to a person that did not exist. Gus stood by the window looking out into the night. Then me and Gus opened the door and left the room. We rewound the tape and watched multiple times. Nobody spoke. The silence was deafening. My name is Frank, and I quit. Effective immediately. I'll go ahead and start by saying I'm not a tattoo guy. I'm honestly not. I hate needles and I'm constantly paranoid of accidentally getting stuck by a dirty one. But that doesn't matter now because I have one. I don't want to, but I made a drunken mistake. And I'm paying for it. Something is very wrong with it. This started when my friend AJ met me at the bar last week. We'd both gotten out of work and I was already on my third beer for the night at McCarvey's when he slid into my booth with his sleeve rolled up. "Check it out," he said. I finally did it. I beer goggled his arm and missed entirely what he was talking about. "You got a new shirt?" "Lightweight," he said. "Dude, look at my arm." I was halfway through brushing him off when my eyes locked on what he was finally pointing at. He'd got a tattoo on his upper forearm of a swirling sun that had almost a primitive edge to it. It looked like something you'd see on old Greek pottery, though I couldn't say if I'd ever seen it somewhere before. "Congrats," I told him. "How interesting." "Come on, man," he said. "You always said I was too much of a wuss to get this done, and now, boom. What do you think?" The noise from the bar was starting to make my head pound, but I still tried to express some form of complex thought. "Neat." "Oh, screw you," he said. "You couldn't handle a needle, and I know you wouldn't." "I wouldn't want to," I told him. "They're dirty, carry disease, and cause infections, and I hate them, so no." "Baby." We both finished our drinks as AJ signaled our waitress for another round. I found my eyes drifting back to his tattoo and the swirling lines that made up the sun. I wondered why it hurt my eyes, but then I realized it wasn't just a plain outline. "Is your sun made up of snakes?" I asked. He grinned a little as he flexed his arm. "Yep, cool, right?" "It's creepy, dude," I said. "You work as a bank teller. Are you trying to give some old lady a heart attack?" "I found it online. Some blog posts from a conspiracy board." "Weird," I said. "What does it mean?" "I'm not entirely sure. This guy from the blog said he'd found it in a book he was translating from... I can't remember the language. Dutch? I don't know. The point is, he was saying it's from some Bronze Age pantheon. Can't remember quite for what. "I'm glad your replacement skin doodle has such a deep meaning." "Hey man, it's just my first one, okay?" He took a swig of his beer and wagged a finger at his temple, trying to spin some gear of thought. He wiped his hand on his tie, then said, "Why don't you finally get one?" he said. "We used to talk about it a lot." "Yeah, when we were in college." "Get one then, man." "No." "Baby." We quietly sat there for a while, nursing our midlife crisis with lager, when one sip finally imparted a thought to my friend's head that I didn't consider the mischievousness of until later. "Shots?" I would like to clarify that I was 5 beers deep on a Friday night with no work the next day. I was not a paradigm of virtue, and I did not pretend to be. I remember taking 5 shots of rum before opening my bloodshot eyes to the light of my apartment window the following morning. Everything hurts. My head, my eyes, my back. AJ had apparently been sober enough to call me a cab and get me home, but not decent enough to get me into my bed. I was on the floor of my dining/living room, head on the carpet, and the rest of me on tile. My temples throbbed, and all I could really remember from the night before were images of the neon lights of the bar. Some girls who'd given me a more than disgusted look, and a big, burly man with a beard hunched over me like some kind of goblin. What made even less sense was that my shirt was on backwards. I pulled myself off the floor, made my way into my bathroom, and praise God I had the day off. I was getting ready to take a shower, and steam was starting to cake the mirror, when I felt the ache in my back morph into something sharper. I was acutely aware of a stinging feeling on my top right shoulder blade, but couldn't twist enough to see what exactly it was. However, as anyone reading this had probably figured out, My answer became obvious. Using my shaving mirror to get the angle, my eyes locked on a swirling symbol of a sun, outlined with the thin forms of several writhing serpents. The center of the sun was pitch black, and the points of each sun flare were the end of a snake's tail. As you can imagine, I freaked the hell out. Forgot about my shower and was on the phone with AJ a minute later, cussing up a storm. AJ couldn't stop laughing and eventually fessed up. Apparently, after our little competition, we started arguing over who was the bigger wuss in our friendship, and that led to an argument about needles. Naturally, tattoos were brought up, and I fell for the whole "you're a loser if you don't" argument. I succumbed to peer pressure, failing every school counselor I'd ever had, and betraying the one solid principle I had outside of not missing Mass on Easter. I was mad at AJ for letting me go through with it, but even more upset with myself for being so willing after one drunken episode. I stared longer at the symbol on my shoulder, and freaked out some more at what my parents would say when they found out. "Relax, dude," AJ told me. "It's not like it's somewhere anyone can see it. Just don't go to the beach, and no one will ever know." I heard his point and even agreed with it, but couldn't stop staring at the symbol. The skin around the ink was puffy and pink, burning in the stale air of my bathroom. At a loss for anything else to say, I asked again what exactly it meant, and why he told the tattoo artist to draw this on me. He laughed again before giddily replying, "You know how we used to research conspiracies together in school?" I did, but I never called it research. We'd get wasted, watch scary videos on YouTube with our business major buddies, then piss ourselves making fun of how ridiculous they were. AJ, on the other hand, was way more into it than any of us, and now that obsession I had learned to accept as a quirky aspect of my best friend had resulted in something I could never erase. I was researching ancient languages one night and found an old blog from like 2011. This guy claimed he'd found a rare book he was translating from German, something to do with an archaeologist's dig in Greece back in 1830. I saw that symbol in it and thought it was cool. "You don't even know what it means? Are you serious?" "Lay off, Tyler," he said. "The point is, I told him to give you the same one I had, so congrats. You're officially inked up." He asked me if I wanted to meet up later for a bit after work, but I told him I was probably just going to catch up on sleep. I hung up, showered, and poked at my ink-stained skin. I had a tattoo and I couldn't even remember it. In some ways I felt robbed of an experience I was entitled to. It's true I never planned on getting a tattoo. I come from a traditional family that looks down on that kind of stuff, so I've never really had the urge to get one. But I also figured that if I ever went through with it, I'd have some kind of say in what it'd be. Instead, I made a drunk decision and ended up with some potentially satanic crap. Not that it'd matter to my mom if she found out. Around lunchtime, I started feeling the sting. It had hurt before, but now it was almost burning, especially in the sunlight. It wasn't just the sting of a needle, but an actual burning sensation. It was like I had sunburn. Every drag my t-shirt made against my skin hurt, and it wasn't going away with time. I put some aloe on it to cool it off, but it didn't do much. I decided to continue with my day and ignore it, but the burn got worse. I got some intense burn cream from the drugstore near my place and decided that if it didn't work, I'd go to the doctor. It'd be just my luck if my drunk tattoo had some infection, but thankfully, the cream worked pretty well. My whole shoulder went numb, but hey, can't feel pain if you barely feel anything. I texted AJ that night and asked him if his tattoo still hurt. "A bit, LOL," he said. "Does it burn?" He left me to read after that. I sent him another text, but he never responded. The next day I tried calling him, but couldn't reach him. I had work on Monday and decided it would be easiest to put him out of my mind and check in with him later. The bank where he worked often had his lunch lined up with mine, so we'd see each other in the food court on the 8th regularly. So I went about my Sunday, long and depressing as it was. and regularly soothed my new tattoo with burn cream. It was still puffy, but the cream was really helping, so I figured it would improve with time. However, that evening when I went to bed, something strange happened. I want to preface this part by saying I'm prone to sleep paralysis, and as anyone who's dealt with that before can tell you, you can see some weird stuff while you're lying there. When I was 15, I swear I saw some huge thin dog at the corner of my room that stared at me for the entire time I was under. Another time, when I was even younger, I saw a man with pale eyes leaning over my body, taking measurements for some unknown reason. I still see that guy sometimes when I have my episodes, but I say all of that to say this. I've seen horrific stuff before, and woke up from it hundreds of times. That time, though, was different. I was in bed for a while when the paralysis finally kicked in. My room was dark save for the faint glow of the city lights leaking from the window like ghostly fingers. I was sure I had fallen asleep at one point, but couldn't tell when. I was in some fugue state. My thoughts hardly made sense. My sight was fuzzy. My eyes darted around in the room in that same familiar panic I knew and hated. Then settled on a figure in the corner of the room. Near the window, standing on a small end table, was the hunched form of an old woman. She was completely nude, save for a dirty gray cloth around her waist and a black gauzy shawl that draped down her threadbare scalp. The shawl wrapped around her neck and almost glittered in the window's glow. My heart raced as she reached a long, gnarled finger out at me and said something in a language I didn't understand, but that buzzed in my head like a drone of a blown-out speaker. Apollos, I made out. Ophis. When she said that, I swear to God I felt something move in my back. I started to convulse wildly as the crone started creeping toward me. The shawl around her neck slinked and slid around her head and neck, becoming fuller and darker the closer it got. By the time she was at my bed, I realized why it moved the way it did. It was not a shawl, but a snake as thick as a man's leg. A dark, angled head appeared before me, and opened wide to flash a set of needle-like white teeth. It recoiled to strike, then closed in on me. I shot up immediately and struggled to breathe. The woman was gone, as was her monstrous snake, but my heart was still racing. I freaked out, drank a glass of water, then stood in front of the mirror of my bathroom for a solid hour checking myself for any kind of injury. I was paranoid. I knew there shouldn't be any mark on me. There couldn't be. It was impossible to get injured from a dream, but I couldn't help myself. I felt as if I was going crazy. I kept hearing those words over and over again. Apollos. Ophis. What was that? I asked for my reflection. It gave no response, but did move in a way I didn't expect. For a second, briefer than a wink, I thought I saw something pulse under the skin of my shoulder. I called in sick the next morning after trying and failing to sleep with the lights on. AJ still wouldn't pick up, so I went to the bank to confront him in person. By that point, I was convinced the tattoo was infected, or the ink was contaminated. Either way, something was causing me to hallucinate. I scanned the tellers, saw he wasn't in, then asked the manager if they'd seen him. No, she told me. He called in sick for the next few days. Didn't give much of a reason why, but he had the hours, so I didn't press. You think he's okay? I assured her he was, but clearly didn't say so convincingly. Her gaze grew more concerned as she looked at me. Are you good? You're not looking too well yourself. I peeled off to the bathroom without saying another word. My back was on fire. The bank restroom was empty, and I took full advantage. I ripped off my hoodie, pulled up my t-shirt, and instantly felt the pain of cool, sterile air on my hot skin. I was sweating all over, and my face was almost green. My back was sensitive to the touch, and I soon saw why. Boils. Hot and pus-filled. Poxed my upper back. My skin was pink and yellow from the heat. and my skin peeled like layers of a rotten onion. The pain was near unbearable, and heat radiated from the black serpentine sun on the corner of my back. I grabbed my bag and tried to apply more cream to the tattoo, but my hand shot away with pain. The cream sizzled like butter in a hot pan, and the fingers that tried to apply it now had third-degree burns. It was like my back was the top of an oven. Confused and panicked, I went to throw my shirt and hoodie back on, but my hand went through a set of holes that didn't exist before. Both of the back right shoulders had singed holes the size of hockey pucks. I threw them on anyway, and made my way out of the bank. I decided I needed to find AJ. We needed to figure out what the hell this was, and fast. I took the bus to his apartment, attracting stares. The rest of my skin was turning gray and greenish. I started coughing uncontrollably, creating a bubble around myself as fellow commuters gave me space. It was like having a fever and being stuck in a desert. I was delirious. As I left the bus, I could have sworn I saw that old woman again, sitting and stroking the snake that choked her. When I made it to AJ's apartment, I already knew something bad had happened. The door was unlocked, and there was a foul, sweet smell in the air. AJ? I called out to him as I burst into his living room. AJ, we need to... I was left speechless by the sight before me, hunched in a dining room chair, shirtless, soaking wet, and steam rising from a plastic tub of water. AJ sat trembling with his arms submerged in the water and looked up at me with fear. Ice. Please, for the love of God, give me ice. I rushed in and went to pull his arm out, but he screamed, Tyler, for the love of God, ice, please. I started toward the fridge, but he redirected me. The bathroom. I did as he asked and ran into the other room. Everything was a mess. There were papers everywhere, along with food wrappers, soda cans, and towels that led in a path toward the bathtub. Piles of plastic ice bags were littered around the toilet, and his tub was full of ice. Atop the cubes was an empty plastic trash bin. I used it to quickly scoop up ice and ran back to my friend. The water around his arm was boiling out of the sides of the bin, but still he kept it submerged. I poured in the ice as he screamed and yelled at him. What the hell is this thing doing to us? Through gritted teeth and hissing breath, he relented. I don't know. It was just something off a website. It wasn't supposed to. This wasn't... It was then that I realized he had no skin up to his shoulder. I could see tendons and bone through the bubbling flesh of his elbow. Have you seen her too? My blood ran cold as I stared into his graying eyes. What? She tells me things in my sleep, things I don't understand. Apollos, he muttered. A yellow glow steamed under the ice water and AJ wailed. He pulled out his arm and started crying. His hand was crusted black like burnt toast, and flame rose from the serpent sun on his wrist. Its black center seemed almost hollow, as AJ's voice faded and he fell to the floor wrist up. The flames rose softly around his seared wrist, rising like tinder as smoke filled the room. She told me this would happen, he said with a croak. She'll tell you too. His body lurched, and beneath his skin from his legs to his chest and belly, tendrils convulsed and slithered, making their way to his burning arm. From the darkness of that sun came the head of a great snake, the same snake from my vision. It bore its teeth and hissed as the flames grew higher, and I ran as fast as I could from the apartment. I heard sirens not long after I left. I knew what they were for. I'm at my apartment now, at a loss writing this. I can feel the serpents under my skin. I think it's more than one, but I'm not sure why. My back is burning. I can't get enough ice from the fridge. I don't want to hurt anyone in my apartment complex. I don't want anyone to get hurt, but I don't know what to do. Please, does anyone know what any of this is? Can anyone help me? Does anyone know about the book this symbol is from? Please message quickly. Please. It's getting hotter. I wanted to share a story about when I was a kid that still disturbs me to this day. We had a room in our house unlike any other. It wasn't different aesthetically, only in what it was used for. It had only one purpose: to punish us when we misbehaved. My brother and I hated that room, but not for the reason you might be thinking. To us, it was just the annoying, boring place we had to stand in when our parents were upset with us. And yeah, we usually deserved it. We hated it, but as we grew up, we knew it was justified. However, it was too dark. Not kid afraid of the dark dark. Not the hallway light is off dark. This was the kind of dark that felt unnatural. The kind most people never experienced. In our house, it was just called the timeout room. It sat at the end of the hall tucked between the linen closet and the spare bedroom. A plain door with a plain knob and nothing special about it. No warning sign, no lock. If you didn't know what it was for, you'd assume it was storage or a guest bedroom. But my brother and I knew. If we misbehaved, talked back, snuck cookies, fought too loud, or slammed a door, we were sent there. Timeout room, Mom used to say. Lights off, door closed. That was the punishment. And when you're little, it makes sense. Darkness is uncomfortable. It makes you behave. It makes you feel small. My mom never raised her voice. My dad never counted to 3. They never lectured. They never dragged us by the arm. They just pointed, and we went. For a long time, it really did feel normal, like a strict but fair rule in a strict but fair house. If my brother went in first, I'd press my ear against the door and whisper, "How long you got?" Sometimes he whispered back. Sometimes he didn't. Sometimes I'd hear him sniffling, and sometimes I'd hear nothing at all. Then my turn would come. Mom or Dad would point, and I'd walk to the timeout room. I'd open the door and peer inside first every time, giving my parents a chance to change their minds, but of course they never did. Peering into the room from the outside always felt weird. The only areas visible were where the light from the hall spilled in. There were no windows, no furniture. There was nothing inside except a tall standing lamp. It stood in the corner of the room, its rough yellow lampshade dark. It was always just barely visible in the dim light. I'd walk in and close the door, letting the darkness claim me. Then I'd stand there with my arms at my sides, staring into nothing, counting in my head the way kids do when they're trying to make time move faster. 10 Mississippi, 20 Mississippi, 30 Mississippi. I never thought to question why the room was always so much darker than the rest of the house, why no light ever seeped in from the cracks of the door. I never wondered why the door shut with a soft but distinct click, even though it had no lock. I never asked why the lamp in the corner was the only thing in the room, and I never asked why I wasn't allowed to turn it on. Because the rules were simple. Darkness was the punishment. You don't turn on the light. And when you're a little kid, rules feel like physics, like gravity, like something the world is built out of. They are immovable, but then you get older, and rules start to look less substantial, less like fate and more like choices. I was maybe 10 or 11 the first time I decided I was done playing along. It was something petty that got me sent there. Talking back, I think. I remember the heat in my face, the sharp satisfaction of having said what I said, and then the immediate punishment. Timeout room. I stomped down the hallway like it was my own house and my own rules, threw the door open and stepped inside with my chin up. The door closed behind me, the darkness swallowed me, and I waited for my eyes to adjust. But they didn't. They never did. There wasn't even the tiniest bit of light coming from underneath the door like there should have been. This wasn't something I had considered before, but now it seemed odd. That should have been the first red flag. Darkness always softens after a few seconds. Even at night, you can usually make out shapes. A window, a doorway, or even your own hands. But in that room you couldn't. It wasn't just darkness. It was blank. Like my eyes were open, but the sun itself had been turned off. I stood there, irritated, defiant. Then, slowly, curiosity started crawling up the back of my neck. There was a lamp in there. I knew there was. I'd always seen it when the door was open, so why couldn't I see even the faintest outline of it then? This was the first time I ever allowed my mind to really wander in that room. I reached my hands out and started feeling the air in front of me, stepping carefully. Soon my fingers brushed a wall. I slid them along it, moving sideways until I found the lamp's shade. Rough fabric and dusty at the top. There was the switch, a little turn knob on the socket. My heart knocked once against my ribs. Not fear exactly, more like the thrill of breaking a rule, the thrill of making my own decision, possibly the first real choice I had ever truly made for myself. I turned it clicked, and I heard a slight buzzing, but nothing else changed. I frowned into the void, blinking hard. Again, then again, like my eyes were somehow stuck. Still nothing. A cold beat of uncertainty formed in my stomach. The lamp had clicked. I'd felt it, heard it. So why was it still perfectly black? I reached up again and felt around the socket. Maybe the bulb was missing. Maybe it was loose. Or maybe it had just burned out. My fingers found the bulb and I pressed my fingertips gently against the glass, holding them there. 1 second, 2, and then I yanked my hand back so fast I almost stumbled. The bulb was hot. The lamp was on and I still couldn't see a thing. My mouth went dry. Confusion overtook me. My first thought was something childish and yet terrifying in a real-world way. What if I couldn't see anymore at all? What if I'd gone blind? I swallowed and lifted my hands in front of my face. Nothing. I waved my fingers. Still nothing. I squeezed my eyes shut and opened them again wide, like I could force light back into them. But still the darkness remained. My breathing got louder in the silence, faster as confusion turned to panic, but I frowned again as I noticed something. The rhythm of my breathing didn't quite line up anymore. It sounded wrong. I held my breath, but the other one didn't. A second breath, a faint, wet inhale. Behind me. I turned, but the sound still came from behind. My skin prickled. I turned again faster, still behind me. It wasn't moving around the room. It wasn't echoing. It was just there, right behind me, breathing. My breath stopped and I could hear it clearly. At first it was slow, like someone trying to stay quiet. Then it sped up. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Closer than close. The kind of close you feel in your bones. I wanted to call out. I wanted to yell, "Mom?" or "Dad?" or even my brother's name. But something in me knew it wasn't them. Then I felt a pressure touching my face. Soft at first, like a blanket being ruffled. Not like it had just been placed there, but like it had always been there, and only just moved a little. Then I could feel it. Firmer, specific. 2 shapes pressed over my eyes. Not a cloth, not a hood. Hands. 2 hands, one covering each eye. Palms sealed against me. My whole body locked up. The breathing was right at my ear now. Rapid and eager, like whatever was behind me was excited that I'd finally noticed. Excited or angry. I lifted my own hands and grabbed at the ones covering my eyes. They felt wrong. Too cold. Too smooth. Not skin, not quite. More like rubber that had been sitting in ice water. I yanked and twisted, panic rising like a scream up my throat, but the hands didn't budge. They clung to me with a strength that didn't make sense for something with fingers that thin. I started flailing, swinging my elbows back over my shoulders, trying to hit whatever was attached to me. The moment my elbow connected with something solid behind my head, it screeched. It was not a sound I had ever heard before, a sound like metal dragging across metal, so loud my ears rang instantly, so sharp it felt like it was slicing my skull open. I screamed, pure reflex and terror spilling out of me, and I threw my arms back harder, clawing, punching blindly at whatever was latched onto me. It answered with a monstrous bite, sharp teeth embedding into my skin where my neck met my shoulder. I felt a sudden tearing heat, like someone had pressed a row of needles into my skin and pulled. I howled and my knees buckled. My whole world was still black, those cold hands now starting to dig into my eye sockets, the screech drilling into my head. My strength was leaving me. My throat grew hoarse as I screamed until it cut out entirely. Gone. In the absence of my own terror, I could hear the buzzing from the lamp, now much louder than when I had first turned it on. I tried to stagger forward, to slam into the door, to get out, but it was still latched onto my neck. The buzzing grew even louder. I started to feel dizzy, my body beginning to sway, and then the door flew open. I heard it swing and slam against the wall. I still couldn't see anything, but I could feel it, like warmth on my face, like the air changing. Footsteps came, fast and heavy. No gasp, no scream, no voice at all, just movement. Then a solid impact right behind my head. The hands ripped off my eyes in an instant, scratching my face. The thing cried out, its screech cutting into a strangled sound, and then disappeared like an echo through a pipe. I collapsed forward onto the carpet, gasping, clawing at my face, my neck burning where I'd been bitten. I blinked and blinked and blinked, but the darkness stayed. I couldn't see. I still couldn't see. Then I felt arms around me. My mom pulled me against her chest like she was trying to shield me from the room itself. Her hands were warm, human, real. "It's okay," she said, and her voice was calm in a way that didn't match what had just happened. "It's okay. It's okay. You're okay." I shook so hard my teeth clicked. "I can't see," I choked out. "Mom, I can't see." "I know," she said softly, rocking me. "I know. Just breathe. Just breathe." The hallway smelled like laundry detergent and dinner. Normal smells. Safe smells. My mom's shirt pressed against my face. Her heartbeat was steady. Like this wasn't a surprise. Like she'd been waiting by the door. I squeezed my eyes shut again and forced them open, and suddenly, light. The hallway snapped into place. The carpet, the walls, the open door. My mom's face above me, pale but composed. Her eyes focused on me and not on the room. I sobbed and clung to her like a drowning person. Behind her, past her shoulder, I could see into the timeout room now. She had pulled me out without me realizing it. I could see inside clearly now. The lamp was on. The shade glowed, but the inside of the room still looked wrong. Not dark anymore, just deeper than it should have been. Like the corners didn't end where the walls were supposed to. Like the room had more room inside it than the house had space for. But as I blinked, my vision blurring and unblurring, the room seemed to fade back into reason. It was normal once again. My mom shifted, blocking my view. Her hand pressed gently at the back of my neck, and I flinched from the pain. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't check the lamp. She didn't look for what bit me. She just held me and whispered that everything was okay, over and over until my breathing slowed and my crying turned into hiccuping silence. When I finally pulled back enough to look at her, I expected anger, confusion, fear, but all she gave me was a tired, practiced expression, the kind adults wear when a storm they expected finally arrives. "Why is that room like that?" I whispered. My mom's thumb brushed my cheek, wiping away a tear. Because, she said quietly, it works. That was all. No explanation, no comfort beyond her arms and her voice. She carried me away from the doorway, and when I looked back one last time, she shut the timeout room door with the same soft click. I didn't tell my brother what happened, and he didn't ask. After that, the bite mark on my neck healed into a small, crescent scar that can still be seen if you look close enough. The timeout room stayed at the end of the hallway. The lamp stayed in the corner. The rule stayed the same. Lights off, door closed. And I'll give you the neat little ending everyone wants, because it's true. I never misbehaved again. She was right. It works. A few years ago, I lived in a quiet town where nothing much really ever happened. I worked at a local retail store, went out to a nearby bar to see my friends most evenings, and walked home the same way every night. Then one night I spotted a poster taped to a lamp post at the end of the road. The photo of a small, fluffy white dog on it caught my attention, and I stopped to take a closer look. It looked like a Bichon or something similar, with big dark eyes and clean fur. One of its ears didn't sit quite right, slightly folded, like it had healed that way, and its lower teeth poked out just slightly. Lost dog. Biscuit. Microchipped, no collar. Friendly, but please approach cautiously. He is afraid of men and loud sounds. If found, please call. A number at the bottom. By the end of the week, I saw many more of the same posters on lampposts down my street and the ones next to it. Whoever owned Biscuit clearly cared a lot. Having lost our family's golden retriever a few years ago, I couldn't help but feel for them. I was walking home from the bar and had just passed the local corner shop when I spotted her. A middle-aged woman, walking slowly down the opposite side of the street. She wore a long, dark navy trench coat. Her hair was tucked in her collar, and she wore sunglasses. Even though it was dark out, walking beside her was that dog. Same fluffy coat, folded ear, lower teeth poking out slightly with its mouth closed. I blinked and glanced back as she kept walking. I debated following, but as she proceeded further down the street and out of view, I told myself I probably saw wrong and went home. After all, it was almost midnight, and I only saw the dog clearly for a moment under a street lamp. But the uneasy feeling persisted. A few nights later, I was walking down the same street when I stopped and did a double take. It was the same woman walking the dog as I passed the corner store. I stopped in my tracks and took a proper look this time. The dog was Biscuit. I was absolutely sure of it. "Hey," I called out, but she didn't respond. Just kept walking with her head slightly down, leash loose in her hand. I called the number as soon as I got inside, and it rang twice before a man answered. "Hello?" "Hi," I said quickly. "I think I might have just seen your dog." There was a pause. "Oh my God, are you serious?" The relief in his voice was immediate. "Yeah, I think I saw a woman was walking him about half an hour ago. Looked exactly like the one in the photo." Another pause. "Someone else called and told me that a few days ago, too," he said, his voice quieter now. "Was it near a corner shop?" Something about the way he said it made my stomach drop. "Yeah," I said. "Just past it." Okay. "And did anyone else see her there?" "No, it was just me." I called out to her, but she kept on walking like she didn't hear me. I could hear him thinking. "God, that's suspicious. You walk past that place often?" "Couldn't agree more, and yeah. I walk past that shop most nights when I go home from the bar. I take the bus from there to Church Road and walk past it on the way back." "All right. I'll be on the lookout in that area. If you see her again, do not approach her. Just drop me a text ASAP telling me where you saw her and where you think she's headed. If you don't mind. I'd appreciate that." "Of course." Thanks for calling. The police are crap with this sort of thing. Yeah, I believe that. I sighed. He exhaled shakily. Name's Matt, by the way. And you are? Sarah, I replied. Well, thanks, Sarah. This is a huge help. Can't thank you enough. I can't promise a huge cash reward, but if I can just help me get him back, I'll do anything I can to repay you. No, honestly, Matt, it's fine. Glad to help. When I hung up, I remember feeling good, like I'd done something kind. I saw her again a few nights later. I'd just gotten off the bus outside of the library coming home from the bar, the street lights casting that dull orange glow over everything. I crossed the road, hands tucked into my coat, already thinking about getting home. Then I froze. Across the street, moving slowly past the row of parked cars, was the woman in the trench coat, walking Biscuit again. For a second, I just stood there watching. Then I fumbled my phone out of my pocket and typed quickly. Just saw her again, outside the library, heading east towards Waverly. I hit send. I hesitated, then started walking as I kept my eyes on her. Slowly at first, keeping a good distance, but she didn't look back. Just kept walking at that same steady pace, holding the leash. I typed again as I followed. She's just turned onto Maple, still heading down. No reply from Matt yet. I followed discreetly for a minute or two. I kept well back, my footsteps quiet against the pavement, my eyes fixed on her, trying not to lose sight of Biscuit. She turned down a road, then again down another a few moments later, a narrow road I no longer recognized, and then she slipped into an alleyway. It was long and dark, running between two rows of buildings, barely lit except for a flickering light at the far end. She didn't hesitate, just walked straight into it. I approached its entrance. She's gone into an alley off Maple. I'm right behind her. I pressed send and stepped in cautiously. My footsteps echoed faintly as I moved forward, and my eyes adjusted to the dim light. I could still see her, further ahead now. Her silhouette stretched long against the wall. She kept walking, but she was speeding up now. I took a few quicker steps, my heart starting to pound, but it wasn't long before she disappeared into the darkness. Dang it, I muttered to myself. I stood there for a few seconds, breathing unevenly, listening, then looked down at my phone. Still no reply from Matt. I swallowed, suddenly very aware of how alone I was, deep in the alleyway, hoping Matt would see the text in time to do something about it. I put the phone back in my pocket and turned to leave. That's when something grabbed me from behind. An arm wrapped around my upper body, yanking me backwards before I could even react. Another hand clamped over my mouth, cutting off the scream that tore out of me. Panic exploded through me as I thrashed, kicking, trying to wrench free, but the grip tightened instantly, strong and controlled around me. I tried to scream again, but it came out muffled against the hand as I was dragged towards a van parked further down the alley. My phone slipped in my grip slightly, then suddenly, light. The torch had switched on, bright and blinding. I didn't think, just twisted my wrist and shoved it back toward the attacker's face. The beam hit him directly. He flinched just enough for his grip to loosen. I elbowed him as hard as I could on his side and tore free. My feet pounded against the concrete as I sprinted down the alley, my breath coming in sharp, panicked bursts and sobs. I didn't look back. I just ran as fast as I could. When I reached the end, I finally glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. The alley behind me was empty, like it had never happened. I didn't stop running until I got home. Slamming the door behind me, I locked it with shaking hands, my chest heaving as I pressed my back against it. Then I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face as I called the police. I gave them the details they asked for, and when I hung up, I checked my phone, scrolling up my notifications. Absolutely nothing from Matt. My blood ran cold when I saw the article a week later. Lost dog posters linked to attempted abductions. Police in Oregon are issuing a public warning following a call from a woman connected to fake lost dog posters. Investigators believe the posters featuring a small white dog and a contact number were used to identify and target individuals in specific neighborhoods. A similar incident was previously reported by a young woman in Colorado, prompting concerns that the method was used across multiple states. Police are advising residents, do not call numbers listed on unofficial posters, do not follow associated individuals, and report suspicious activity directly to authorities. I stared at the screen as everything began to fall into place. Only people living in my area would have seen those posters in the first place, a predictable radius. Then the woman, she was placed walking the same route at the same time every night. Only people out that late would notice, and she was dressed suspiciously, conspicuously enough to be noticed. Out of those people, only some were out late predictably enough to see her more than once to be sure, predictably enough that no one would report them missing for hours. And out of those, only some would care enough to call. People who liked dogs and felt bad, people who were easy. And then, it was just a case of picking out the voices belonging to young women, his target of choice. Did anyone else see her? At the time, it sounded normal, but it wasn't a question. It was a filter. Were you walking alone at night? Not only had I answered, I told him everything. Where I usually walked and where I'd seen her. I thought I was just being helpful. Well, he was mapping the route I took home, so he could place her along it, where I'd be sure to find her. Just drop me a text ASAP telling me where you saw her. Live updates, real-time tracking, and where you think she's headed. Of course I followed her. Not too far, just enough to step exactly where he needed me in the middle of that dark alley. I had wondered that night how there were hands on me out of nowhere, like he'd been standing there the whole time waiting. It was because he knew exactly where I was, and exactly where I'd be. There could have been no victim more perfect, and his system had been designed to select it. Thousands of people had walked by those posters, possibly hundreds caring enough to stop and notice, maybe a dozen of those calls. Then they were crossed off one by one, until there was only one left. I slowly lowered my phone, my fingers trembling. While I was looking for his lost dog, he had already found me. It was getting to the point where it's affecting my quality of life. I wasn't sure exactly where the source was, but I suddenly felt it deep inside of my torso. I remember I was clocking off of work when it started. A slight discomfort back then, a relief compared to what was awaiting. While keeping my eyes on the road, I moved my torso side to side to try to relieve myself, which fortunately worked. When I arrived home, I felt more exhausted than usual and went to bed early. The next day the itch came again, stronger but bearable. The lingering feeling was on the back of my mind, and in between busy moments of work I would twist and turn trying to get rid of that itch. Despite my efforts, it stayed persistent. When I got home that night, I had trouble sleeping. Closing my eyes seemed to amplify the feeling. I don't remember when I drifted off. On the third day, it became so bad I felt chills running down my legs. The moment I woke up, I found myself twitching erratically into strange positions to try and get rid of the itch. I even tried pinching, grabbing my skin in handfuls and stretching it around, and punching and slapping myself. Weirdly, I swore I felt something move, but no matter what I did, it just wouldn't go away. I decided I needed to go to the doctor to check this out. I called in sick to work and called my family doctor, who agreed this was a peculiar situation. After asking me a series of further questions, in which the entire time I was bouncing on my feet, she told me to schedule in for an ultrasound. The appointment was going to be late at night. I wanted to schedule the appointment as soon as possible, and it was the earliest time. I'll take what I can get. Trying my best to ignore it and moving on with my day, I made myself some breakfast. My brain protested, screaming for itch relief. But there was nothing I could do. It's not like I could grab a knife to cut myself open and scratch my insides or something. Along with that thought, I eyed the drawer the knives were in. I shook my head at myself. I wasn't that crazy. I just needed to endure a few more hours. After waiting through an excruciating afternoon, it was finally time to leave. I grabbed the keys and bolted out the door, no longer able to sit still. When I arrived at the hospital, I was greeted by a doctor who led me to a room where I was to be changed into a gown, and then into the ultrasound room. The doctor rolled up my gown, using a towel to cover my groin, and put the cool device down onto my body. I could feel the gel spreading as she pressed towards the area of interest, which I informed her of moments before. She moved the device back and forth around the area, and then suddenly went still. "What's wrong?" I asked. I lifted my head to look at her. Her eyes were wide, eyebrows knitted together. Her expression was a mix of fear and confusion, probably the last thing I wanted to see in this situation. Did I have some disease? Was there something wrong with my body? She turned the ultrasound screen towards me. At first I couldn't make out anything but a giant shifting blob, but upon closer inspection, I could see the legs. Thousands. No, millions of them. Spiders. Tiny baby spiders overran my liver, crawling fast on top of each other, entirely covering my liver in a dark mass. To top it all, in the center was the biggest spider of all, splayed on top of the baby spiders with a size comparable to a large tarantula. I could no longer pull myself together. I was so itchy. I started thrashing and writhing on my bed. My doctor yelled something, and other doctors came rushing in. I begged them to do something. Anything. After they assessed me and the ultrasound, they put me to sleep. I woke up in a hospital bed, still groggy from the anesthesia. I looked around for a doctor while I tried to recall my memories. That's right. They had operated on me while I was asleep. I no longer felt the itch. I've never been so grateful to be itch-free in my life, thinking I've been taking everyday life for granted. A doctor came in and checked on my condition before informing me about what happened. He said he had never seen an anomaly like this in his life. I would be surprised if he had. 1,074 spiders. That's how many were removed from me. The number sent chills down my spine. The doctor must have read my unsettled expression and assured me that I was going to be all right. I thanked him for his hard work. I was discharged a few days later. Going back to my normal life wasn't as easy. Though I was fine physically, I didn't recover mentally. How could this anomaly even be possible? And why me? Eventually I went back to work and tried to forget about the experience, burying it deep where I would never think of it again. Until today. It's only been 2 weeks since I returned home, and when I woke up this morning I felt a familiar sensation, a slight itch. I think the fear I tried so hard to push away is coming true. A fear that, maybe during the operation, there was a slight possibility, that they missed one. When I was a little girl, I heard the soft hoot of an owl nearby. I got out of bed and made a run to the window in the living room, where I presumed I would have the best chance of seeing the owl. I grabbed the curtain, but before I could open it, my mother stopped me, awakened by my loud steps. "You can't do that," my mother said in a gentle but strict voice. "Sorry," I answered, avoiding my mother's eyes. "It's fine, but just remember you can't open the curtains at night because you might catch the attention of the witches." She reminded me as she walked me back to my room and tucked me in. I can't remember if I gave her an answer, but I do remember her holding me tightly, and at some point I fell asleep. There is a well-known story in my town. Owls are witches in disguise. They transform at night and fly around the neighborhood searching for their next victim. Once they choose someone, they will stand on the roof of a house and tell the resident of the impending death. Sometimes death isn't immediate, but on this occasion it was. 2 houses away from mine, a couple's newborn baby had passed away in his sleep. The news spread quickly. Medically speaking, the baby boy died from SIDS, but we all knew what had really happened. A witch had stolen his soul. A few months later, everything had calmed down again. The couple that had lost their baby had moved away, and a new couple moved in. No one had heard an owl in those same months, and finally everyone slept in peace. One morning I went outside to our backyard to search for ladybugs. Finding them meant I would have good luck. "Good morning, birdies." I waved to the budgies inside the cage. I loved seeing them fly around the large cage my father had built for them. But that day, I was on a mission and quickly ran towards the garden to find as many ladybugs as possible. Every time I found a ladybug, I would count how many spots they had and then place them on my hand in the hope they would become my friend. I laughed as they tickled me with their small feet. Every time one flew away, I felt a little sad, but quickly recovered and went back to my search. The chirping of the budgies had become my background music. An hour passed, or maybe 2, or maybe it had just been 10 minutes when the budgies' usual clatter became terrified screams. I quickly turned around to see an owl trying to reach for the cage. I forgot my task at hand and ran towards the cage and the owl. Once closer, I realized the owl was injured. There was some bleeding on her left wing. It took me a moment to realize the budgies had quieted down and the owl was staring directly at me. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." I tried to reassure the owl. The owl continued to stare at me, giving the cage occasional glances. "Let me get you some band-aids and then I can give you some food. Please stay," I yelled at the owl as I ran back inside. I ran to my room and grabbed several band-aids just in case the owl had a large cut. I always felt better when my mom would put a band-aid on me. I hoped I could do the same for the owl. She still stood by the cage when I came back. I approached slowly, trying not to scare her away. I touched her head and marveled at the softness of her feathers. "This will hurt a little, but I promise you will feel better soon," I told the owl as I lifted her wing and placed 2 pink band-aids. The owl didn't move. She stared at me the whole time, but never tried to bite. Then another thought occurred to me. She was probably hungry and that's why she was standing by the cage. She wanted seeds. I didn't know at the time that owls were carnivores. I thought all birds ate seeds. I grabbed the bag of seeds under the cage and placed a handful of them in my hand. I offered them to her, hoping that if she ate, she would feel better. The owl looked at me for a long time. I couldn't tell what she was thinking, but I still held out my hand in the hope she would eat and feel better. As if making up her mind, the owl took a bite of the seeds, but with it, she bit my hand. "Ouch!" I cried as I moved my hand away. The owl stood there, watching me. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I had been bitten by the budgies before, but I had never bled from it. I told myself this was probably an accident, and while I didn't want to get bitten again, I still extended my hand to the owl in the hope she would eat more. The owl took one more glance at me and took it upon herself to finish the seeds that were left on my hand. Once she ate all the seeds, even the bloodied ones, she left without a warning. I'm not sure why I lied to my parents about how I cut my hand. I told them I had tripped and had caught my hand on some sharp rock. After they made sure I didn't need stitches, they put some band-aids on and just told me to be more careful. A few nights later, I heard the owl's warning of impending death. Remembering my mother's warning, I didn't go check on the window. Instead, I prayed the owl wasn't at my neighbor's house because Don Cristobal made the best tortillas and I wanted to go ask for some in the morning. That night, the owl was particularly busy. Usually we would hear hoots for a few minutes and then she would be gone. This time her warnings continued through the night until the sun broke the night. The next morning, nothing happened. With my parents' permission, I went next door and ate some of the best tortillas I've had in my life. The neighbors whispered about the occurrence of the previous night, wondering who would be next to die. The fear of death dwindled in the next few days as nothing had happened. Maybe this time the owl had been wrong. Maybe this particular owl wasn't a witch. Maybe. And then it happened. I was sitting outside with my parents having sandwiches when I saw the owl I had fed. The bandages were still stuck on her wing. As I was about to point her out to my parents, the ground began to shake. My parents tried to reach out to me. I tried to get up and run towards them, but it was impossible. In my desperate attempt to reach my parents, I hadn't realized the owl was heading towards me. When I saw her, I was confused. I saw her grow. She became big, almost as big as my parents. She swooped down and extended her wings over me, covering me. I could hear my parents' screams, the houses around me falling and the cracking of the ground. When it finally stopped, everything was silent. The owl removed her protective wings and without warning she flew away. Everything around me was destroyed. The whole neighborhood was gone. I would later be told I was the sole survivor. My story of being saved by the witch owl was dismissed as a child's way of coping with the unimaginable. I know what I saw. I still see her flying by my house from time to time. I carry the scar she left on my left hand from that feeding. And I know that one day she will stand on my roof to announce my death. I honestly haven't really talked about this since it happened. I mean, I don't know what I'd say. Nobody would believe me anyway, but it's been weighing on me lately. And who else to share it with but the internet? This all happened when I was about 14 or 15, as cliché as it sounds. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other. You barely needed to lock your doors at night. Blah, blah, blah. Well, that's until this all went down. At the time, I had a small but tight-knit group of friends. There was Marshall, who was my next-door neighbor, and also happened to be my cousin. Our other friends, Sarah and Jeffrey's little sister Tina, who was a year or two younger than us, and sometimes tagged along on our adventures. I've changed a few details to hide my identity, but for some additional information, this was the early 80s, somewhere in North America. It all started at the beginning of the school year. Marshall, Sarah, Jeffrey, and I were all starting 9th grade. We had gotten news that there was a new school teacher, which was exciting to us, since we hadn't had anyone move here in our entire lives. His name was Mr. Abaddon, but we would call him Mr. A. If it was too hard to pronounce. We were all sitting in the grade 9 to 10 classroom. Our town was so small we had to combine a lot of classes and grades, discussing who he was or what he would be like. "Good morning, kids," we heard an unfamiliar voice bellow. The first thing I noticed about Mr. A was how he was dressed. Our town was predominantly blue collar. Most folks here lived a pretty simple life. Even on fancy occasions we mainly dressed down. Not him, though. He had a 3-piece suit on, freshly ironed, with 2 shiny shoes to match. He was incredibly handsome, and had the most contagious smile I've ever seen. "I'm Mr. A. It's nice to meet all of you," he said, clasping his hands together. "I'm mainly here to teach science and some history, but I'll be happy to help you with anything else you need. Just let me know." We all immediately fell in love with him. Maybe it was just something new for us to look at. Maybe he was the first person in expensive clothes we had ever seen. but something about him just drew us all towards him, in the beginning at least. He taught us science mainly, as he said, but he'd also check in on us at other times of the day. He even always had his classroom door open in case we ever just needed someone to talk to. He was like our teacher, counselor, and best friend all in one. He knew all of our names, which, granted, there were only a couple hundred kids from kindergarten to grade 12, and most of us were either named Lisa or Mike, but still. But as time wore on, my friends and I grew a bit more wary of him. He was nice and all, but something about him was just off. He just felt fake. Have you ever been to an amusement park and met a mascot? They're all friendly and hug you and all. They pose for a picture, but when you leave, you turn around and the facade is off. They just look dead. That's what Mr. A was like. One day, it must have been around November, Marshall and I had stayed a little after class to get some help with chemistry, even though at this point, my friends and I had grown a little wary of him. Even still, he was so charming it was hard not to be drawn to him when he talked to you. I don't even know how to explain it, but he made you feel like the only person in the world. "Alright, thanks, Mr. A," Marshall said, collecting his work and shoving it into his bag. I stood up and waited for him by the door. "No problem, bud. It's what I'm here for." He winked and smiled, that magnetic smile of his that lit up an entire room. Marshall and I left the room, but I peered through the window after we shut the door, and his smile was just gone. In its place was the most terrifying face I'd ever seen. It was a hideous snarl, not in an "I just smelled something disgusting" way, but in a way that just said he wanted to hurt someone. And that's when I reflected on that smile, and all the times I had seen it, I realized it had just never reached his eyes. It was the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen, but above his eyes there was just nothing. No joy, no warmth. He was faking his charisma. That day, we had met up with our friends at Jeffrey and Tina's house. Since they had the biggest basement, I explained to them what I had seen after leaving Mr. A's room, half expecting them to call it BS, since everyone else in town seemed so in love with him. But to my shock, they agreed with me. "Yeah, he's kind of weird," Jeffrey said, as his mom brought us a plate of cookies. "Thanks, Ma." My friend Lisa and I saw him watching us through a window when we went home for lunch. And also he smells really bad if you've ever been close enough to him. Like roadkill, Tina added. I don't even know why he was in our classroom. He doesn't even teach our grade. Sarah stayed quiet up until then, but I could tell she had something she wanted to say. I've seen him do some weird things. He lives close to my house, I think. I see him walking past my house a lot, and he's not like how he is at school. I don't know, just something about him looks off. If I say what I saw, will you guys believe me no matter what?" We all nodded. It was really late one night, and I woke up to get some water. I looked out the window and he was just there in the middle of the street, but he wasn't walking. He was crawling, like some sort of animal, and he just looked at me, so I ran back to my room. And when I looked back at him, his eyes were different. Not his regular eyes, just not human. When I got upstairs, I swear I heard scratching at my door the rest of the night. We were all silent for a while. We didn't know what to do with that information. After a while, Marshall spoke up. "Sarah, you said you were neighbors, right?" She nodded. We came up with a plan. One day, we'd all go to Sarah's house. When we saw Mr. A walking down her street, we'd follow him to see where he lives. Then the next day, we'd skip school to break into his house and snoop through his stuff. Truthfully, I don't know what we thought would happen. I don't know if we thought demons or monsters or whatever we thought Mr. A was carried around monster identification cards or something. But whatever we expected, it definitely wasn't what we found. We successfully enacted the first part of the plan the next Monday after that conversation in Jeffrey's basement. As quietly as we could muster, we followed him on our bikes. Well, that was until he walked straight into the woods. Sarah lived on the outskirts of our town, past the final house on her block. Was thick woods. It was near impossible to navigate it. We had tried so many summers. But he just walked into it like he didn't even see it. We ditched our bikes and tried to follow him through the woods. It was hard, but we managed to do it. He eventually led us to what looked like an abandoned cabin. Was that his house? It was barely standing. We watched in horror as he opened the door, but his arm phased right through the wood. He opened the door from the inside. Before he stepped into the house, he looked back and made direct eye contact with us. He smiled at us. Not that charming and genuine smile he always gave at school. This one was sinister. I've never seen any human give that expression before. It was pure evil. It was a quiet bike ride home. That night, we decided that Tina wouldn't be allowed to come with us the next day, much to her dismay. "But I want to help," she protested. "I think he's creepy and weird and I want to come with you guys." "Tina, no. I know you just want to help us, but I'm not letting you. Best case scenario, Mr. A is a magician who's creeping on girls. Worst case scenario, we're dealing with demonic stuff. I promise you'll be allowed to hang out with us as much as you want after this. But just this once, stay home with Mom," Jeffrey said roughly. Sarah, Marshall, and I exchanged glances. Obviously, we were no strangers to Tina and Jeffrey's bickering, but this seemed different. Tina sighed. "Okay." That night came and went, and we had all successfully lied to our parents about being sick. Once they had all gone to work, we snuck out. We somehow navigated through the thick woods and found that stupid cabin again, and crept our way in. We all stood there in silence. Whatever this was, there's no way any human was living in here. It wasn't what was in there. It was the lack of what was in there. It was just empty. No furniture, no photos, not even a toilet or kitchen. In my lifetime since this day, I've encountered squatters. I know it's possible to live with no electricity or running water, but there was just a complete lack of anything here. No garbage on the ground, no milk jugs full of piss, nothing. How did he come to work so sharply dressed every day if this is how he was living? "I knew you guys would be coming around," we heard, and all four of us jumped. We had thought he was at work. He came out of the shadows. I was horrified. He looked even less human than usual, but he was still keeping up that stupid, charming voice. "What are you?" Marshall asked, backing up. Mr. A laughed. "That's not important." As he spoke, his voice started warping, almost like a melting record. It got less and less human as he continued. "What's important is that none of you ever tell anyone what you saw." "Then we won't, I promise. We'll leave and I swear we'll never tell anyone. We'll take it to our graves," Sarah said. And Jeffrey nodded frantically. As they pleaded, I paid attention to his face. It was moving. His skin looked like it was morphing into something else. "That's not what I meant. What I meant was that none of you will ever leave here again. Do you see what's happening to me? It's been so long since I've fed." At this point, his voice was completely different. It was so atonal. People have a speech pattern. You may not notice it, but they do. When someone's speaking with no rhythm, it sounds truly so disturbing. His voice was deeper than I thought a person could go, but then again, whatever he wasn't a human. His face had melted away. In its place was, I don't even know how to describe it. His eyes were completely black. His skin was gray and deformed. I heard a cracking sound which I soon realized was his spine. He was growing taller. Suddenly he lunged at us. We all jumped away, but Sarah had been scratched by his nails, which were now monster-like claws. I rushed to grab her, and we both ran up the rickety stairs. I heard in the distance Marshall's screams, and Sarah had to cover my mouth to keep sound from coming out of it. Marshall, my neighbor, my cousin, my best friend. I heard the sickening sound of flesh and bones being pierced through, and thought back to all of the birthday parties and slumber parties we'd have, and how many I'd have without him in attendance. We held our breaths as we heard footsteps approaching us. We both let out a sigh of relief when we saw Jeffrey. He hid with us in an empty closet. We whispered as quietly as we could, discussing an escape. I think I saw a window in this room before I found you guys. If we jumped out, we'd probably break a few bones, but we'd survive, Jeffrey said. Sarah and I nodded as we slowly opened the door. It was eerily silent, not even footsteps. I couldn't even hear Marshall's groans of pain anymore. At least he wasn't afraid anymore. We almost made it to the window when I felt Sarah grip my arm. I looked up in frozen fear when I saw what she was looking at. There was a reason why we couldn't hear Mr. A looking for us anymore. He had already found us. There he was on the ceiling, grinning at us with a haunting smile. He crawled down the wall slowly. He was teasing us. Sarah still had a scratch that was bleeding heavily. I was frozen in fear. There was really no hope for us as he slowly crept towards us. We knew it was over. That is, until Jeffrey lunged towards him. "Jeff, stop!" Sarah shrieked. I tried to tell him to stop, but I was still frozen. Jeffrey was tall for his age, and he played football, but we knew it was a losing battle. There was no way Jeff was beating whatever this thing was. He looked at us, terror in his eyes, although I could tell he was trying to hide it. "Just go. Go through the window. Now!" I felt a rush of adrenaline as I suddenly had control over my body. I approached the window as fast as I could, Sarah close behind me, but she wasn't fast enough. Mr. A reached one arm forward, and even though Jeffrey tried to stop him, it was no use. His razor-sharp claw pierced through her skin. As she collapsed on the ground, Jeff and I shared a look, tears in our eyes, but there was no time to waste. I grabbed him as fast as I could and jumped backwards through the window. We hit the ground with a thump. I could immediately tell my arm was broken, but Jeffrey clearly had it worse than me. "Go," he managed to say. "Come on, let's get up. We have time." I winced as I heard Sarah's screams in the house. "He's busy." I grabbed his arm, but he slapped it away. He shook his head. "I'm not getting out of here, man." "No, come on, please. I'll carry you." "Too slow. You're getting out of here." Maybe I was just in denial, but Jeffrey wasn't. Looking back, logistically, there was no way he'd survive this. Even with the best healthcare in the world, I've never seen so many injuries on one person. He knew it was his time. He gave me a shaky smile, tears in his eyes. "Will you tell her what I did?" I nodded. "Make sure nobody bullies her, Kay?" I began to cry as I began to leave. I didn't want to leave him, but I could hear Mr. A approaching. Then I ran as fast as I could. My family moved pretty soon after that. I tried to tell the police what happened, what really happened, but they didn't believe me. They said Mr. A was a monster, but not the kind I was thinking about, and that I was safe now. I knew it wasn't true. As for Tina, we don't really keep in touch. I tried to tell her what happened, but her mom wouldn't let me near her. Maybe I'll try to find her on Facebook. I did promise Jeffrey, after all. As for Mr. A, I haven't seen him since. Well, at least, that's what I tell everyone. The night after the cops found me, broken arm, covered in blood that wasn't mine, stumbling around the streets, I was being treated in the hospital. Not the crappy, tiny healthcare facility in our town. I had been airlifted to 1 mile away in the nearest big city. I had many things wrong with me, but my parents were told I'd make a full recovery. That night I laid in my hospital bed, in complete shock. I could barely move anything but my head. I turned over to the window and saw someone staring at me. It wasn't Mr. A. He looked completely different, and this was so far away. But I knew that smile, and those stupid eyes anywhere. It was him, even though nobody would believe me. He knew I recognized him, and his smile widened. Before I knew it, he was gone. It's been years and I still don't trust anyone. As far as I know, he's still out there. So please, if you ever meet someone who just seems a little off, even if everyone loves them, listen to your gut and run far away while you still can. In sophomore year of high school, I practically lived in the library. I'd go there almost every day after school to sit and read. Then I'd borrow a stack of books, mostly history, and finish them at home before they were due back. It was routine at this point. That's why I noticed it straight away. I opened a book I'd borrowed about medieval Europe and saw a small white sticker stuck firmly to one of the pages. I leaned in and took a closer look. The sticker was a prescription bottle label. The edges were worn and it had been pieced together in two halves. One side was faded to a thin film. It had been peeled off and reapplied, but I could still read the text. At the top was the name of a pharmacy and a date, and below that were some details. T. Hargreaves, an address list below that. Lisinopril, 10 milligrams. Take 1 tablet by mouth every day. I didn't recognize the medication, but I recognized the name. It was Mr. Hargreaves, my history teacher. I saw teachers and students from my school regularly at this library, so I didn't think much of it at the time, but I still stared at it for a second longer than I probably should have. Then I figured it was a mistake and left it there. He must have been using it as a bookmark and forgotten. I didn't want to peel it off and risk tearing the page. The second time, it caught my attention immediately. Different history book, another label. Same name, address, and medication. This time it was stuck deeper into the book on one of the middle pages. I flipped back a few pages, then forward. Nothing else. Just that one sticker. I remember thinking it was a strange thing to use as a bookmark. By the 4th or 5th time, it stopped feeling like a coincidence. Always the same sticker with his name, stuck on a random page. I went to the library one morning to return a book, well before I'd normally go after school, and saw him there. He was exactly the same as he was in class, friendly and relaxed. "Good to see you're reading," he said with a smile. I greeted him and made some small talk. I almost mentioned seeing the labels, but then I stopped myself. Something made me feel like I wasn't supposed to. At the end of our conversation, I just smiled and left. A few afternoons later, I was back in the library. I went to the history section and plucked a book off the shelf, flipping it open without thinking. Sure enough, there it was again. Mr. Hargreaves' prescription label, pressed flat on one of the pages. Just then a voice snapped me out of my trance. "Hey, how's it going?" I looked up. My friend Matt was standing in front of me, hands in his pockets. Matt didn't come here often. He lived further out, on the edge of town. "I didn't know you even knew where the library was," I remarked. "Ha ha, very funny. I was nearby." We talked for a bit, and then I held the book up slightly. "Look at this. I keep finding Mr. Greaves stickers in these books." He stepped closer and scanned the text. A messenger asked for help from nearby towns. I tapped on the label below it, pressed flat against the page. Matt leaned in and squinted as he read the details on the faded sticker. "Huh, he lives a few streets away from me. Who knew?" "Why would he be putting these in library books?" I asked. Matt shrugged. "I mean, probably just uses whatever's lying around as a bookmark." "That's what I thought the first time," I said. I plucked 2 more books off the shelf nearby that I'd put back a while ago, which I remembered seeing the stickers in. He keeps putting them in books. I reached for a book about wars. Took a moment to find the label, but I knew roughly where it was. Many families were trapped as supplies began to run out. I ran my finger across the label below it, then I put it back on the shelf and opened the third book. A few managed to escape, though most were. Underneath was the label again, in a chapter about the famine. He glanced at it, then back at me, looking mildly amused. Maybe he's just weird. After Matt left that afternoon, I sat at a table with the books I'd taken from the shelf laid out in front of me. I frowned, then shook it off and closed the books, carrying them back to the shelf. A few months passed. I still saw the labels in books every now and then, but I stopped paying them much attention. I didn't think about them again until I was talking to Matt at school one afternoon, leaning against the lockers while people moved around us between classes. "You know those labels you were talking about?" He smirked slightly. "Yeah." "I walk past that house all the time," he said. "Ever since I found out that Hargreaves' address, I can't not notice it. Weird knowing a teacher lives that close to me." I shrugged. They have to live somewhere. Then a pause as he glanced down the hallway. I've heard stuff from inside a few times when I walked past. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of stuff? He frowned like he was trying to decide if it even sounded strange out loud. Like one night I heard something scraping, I guess. And once I think I heard knocking or something, but like from the inside of his door. He made a small motion with his hand, tapping against the locker beside him, and there was a brief silence between us. "Anyway," he added, straightening up, "probably nothing." That afternoon at the library, I found myself thinking about the labels. I pulled out a few books from the history section and started looking for them. And as I found them again, one by one, I noticed something concerning for the first time. The line of text above each sticker. A messenger asked for help from nearby towns. Many families were trapped as supplies began to run out. A few managed to escape, though most were. I swallowed and looked into more books. Efforts to seek help from neighboring regions. A group managed to escape, though some were. My heart started to race. I put the books down immediately and texted Matt. "Hey, can you show me where Hargreaves' house is?" By the time we got there, it was just starting to get dark. The street was quiet, with a few distant figures occasionally walking past under the streetlights. Mr. Hargreaves' house sat halfway down the road. Curtains drawn, no lights on. The same address shown on the prescription label stuck in the books. Matt slowed beside me, hands in his pockets as he glanced at it. "Looks the same as it always does." He shrugged. "What did you think you'd find?" I didn't respond. Couldn't stop staring at it. "We should probably go," he added with a sigh, "before he sees teenagers from his school just standing outside his house. That's gonna be hard to explain." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, you're right." We turned and started walking back the way we came. We'd barely made it a few steps when Matt stopped. I almost walked into him. "What?" I asked. He didn't answer straight away, just tilted his head slightly, listening. Then I heard it too. A dull, hollow sound. Knock, then again. Knock, knock. My heart started racing as Matt turned back toward the house. "That's it," he said quietly. "That's what I was talking about." We both stood there for a second, then walked back towards the house. The front porch croaked slightly as we stepped onto it. The sound came again, louder now from somewhere just beyond the front window. The curtains were drawn, but not fully. There was a small gap where the fabric didn't quite meet. Matt leaned in. "That's weird," he murmured. "I don't remember that." He pointed and I followed his gaze. Behind the curtain, barely visible in the darkness, were wooden boards running horizontally across the window. I felt a chill run through me. "His curtains are always closed," Matt said with a frown. "Wonder why there's wood all behind it." Another knock. Then the curtain shifted slightly. Something moved behind it. I sucked in a breath. "Did you see?" Yeah, Matt whispered. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and turned on the torch, aiming it through the curtains. The light cut through the gap between the boards. An eye, open wide, staring straight back at us. We screamed and stumbled backwards. Matt grabbed my arm. What the hell? The knocking stopped instantly. Silence. Then we heard footsteps from inside the house. We ran. Down the porch steps onto the pavement, away from the house as fast as we could. We didn't stop until we were halfway down the street. My chest was tight, my breathing uneven as I fumbled for my phone. Call them, Matt said. I told the police everything. The books, the labels, the sounds, the eye staring at us through the window. My voice was shaking so badly I could barely get the words out. By morning, everyone knew. Mr. Hargreaves had been arrested and the house had been sealed off. Inside, they'd found a girl. She was 14, only a few years younger than both of us. She'd gone missing around 3 years ago, from a different state hundreds of miles away. Taken, transported, and kept hidden somewhere no one would think to look. A normal house on a quiet street. Locked away in his house for 3 years. She'd been peeling the prescription labels off empty medication bottles and boxes. Whatever she could find in his bin with his address on it without it being noticed. Pressing them carefully between the pages of books he brought home from the library, and would eventually have to return. She couldn't write any messages. If he saw even a mark out of place, there was no telling what he would do, so she worked with what she had, looking through the words in the books and placing the labels with his address under specific words, underlining them with the stickers. Hoping someone, anyone, would notice that she was trapped, needed help, and was unable to escape. It had been right there the whole time. I kept thinking about how many times I'd seen those labels and dismissed them as something harmless, before putting them back on the shelf. If we hadn't gone there that day, she might have never left that house again.